Hello, welcome back. Nick Lenz's novel review, episode 5, Doubleshot number 1. Got 2 Star Trek books for you. First up is Star Trek The Fall, Book 1. Dust, Revelation and Dust, written by regular D Space Nine novelist David R. George III. Takes place, this book takes place from August 22nd to September 1st of 2385. Period about 2 weeks. Now, in case you're wondering, what space station is on the cover? This is Deep Space Nine 2. And some of you might be asking, what happened to the original one that was seen on the TV show? That was destroyed in during a doxology during the Typhoon Pack series, was books 6 and 7. But basically, it's printed books 5 and 6. That's simply how it is. It was destroyed by a group of rogue Andorians. Yeah. And also what happened in the previous printed book, it was revealed that the Andorians are dying because they're having trouble reproducing. I'll explain what happens to that later. In the meantime, this book is dealing with the dedication ceremony. The station is not officially open for business yet. It's just a dedication ceremony for the station. Presided over by President Baco, who's doing a speech. And then she gets shot by a mysterious assassin who turns out to be her chief of staff. But it turns out she was sort of brainwashed into this by another person, who I'm going to review at the end of this little retrospective, this little series. A new president sworn in later on. Of course, this ship right here on the cover, the Galaxy-class ship, that's the USS Robinson. That is a ship commanded by Captain Benjamin Sisko. He's no longer in command of Deep Space Nine. After his parent death, it was handed over to Kira, and then Kira retired. Then a guy named Bond, who was a new character for the expanded universe, he took command of the space station very briefly until he went into a coma, and then he passed away after his daughter took him off life support. And the current commander is Captain Ro Laren. Some of you might remember her as a recurring character from the series Star Trek Next Generation. She became Maquis, and she later became part of the Bajoran militia. Became the station's chief of security after Odo went back to the Gamma Quadrant, and later on she became the captain of the space station. And this is the second command she actually especially had. It's still the same command, just new station. The station was put to proposition by after the destruction of the original space station and the wormhole was destroyed. The wormhole has since reopened. The wormhole's been destroyed twice now. Yeah. He prepared a proposal, and the Federation Council accepted that there should be a replacement of Deep Space Nine space station where the wormhole is, which the Bajorans call the Celestial Temple, because that's where they believe the prophets reside. And the proposal was accepted, and Chief O'Brien is back being the chief of operations. Some of you might remember at the end of the TV show, he went off to Starfleet Academy to become a teacher. Later on, he moved to Cardassia, and now he's back being in charge of the station. And Nog, who took over for him at the end of the series, he's now the assistant chief of operations, which he doesn't mind. From the way I read it, it looked like he didn't mind it too much. And plus, Nog is a complete genius. He has helped out tremendously in the expanded universe as it relates to Deep Space Nine. He was a great chief of operations when Deep Space Nine was around, the original one, and he's very good at his job. So I'm glad the fact they kept him in the same position. The only everyone who was on Deep Space Nine, the only one who stayed was Dr. Bashir. And when the first book of the Typhoon Pack series, he just celebrated his 40th birthday. So basically, Bashir is now in his 40s. I think he's now 42, and he's not married. He's dating the station's chief of security, Sarah Douglas, who was also an agent of Section 31, which is still around, surprisingly. So Section 31 does not play a big role in the series, but a very, very small role in the series. And why is the Enterprise E here? That's later explained that they're sent out to Cardassia to deal with something else. The new president who's sworn in, who is a Bajoran, by the way. First Bajoran to become first president. That's actually quite an accomplishment in the case of Star Trek right there. And he sent the Enterprise the off on some special mission, which I'll talk about in Crimson Shadow. And of course you got the operations up here, you got the promenade here in the circle, typical stuff basically related to Deep Space Nine. It's like business as usual, but it's not. Even though it technically does operate normally, it's not officially open for business yet. This is just dedication ceremony. And President Baco, who's been a regular character in the Expanding Universe books since the predecessor had to resign due to a scandal in the Time 2 series. The Time 2 series is a series of books that fill the gap between Star Trek Insurrection and Star Trek Nemesis. That's simply all it is. And this book right here takes place about 6 years after the events of Star Trek Nemesis. I praise the story, very original for Star Trek. Assassination, well, that's not very original to Star Trek. That has been used before as a plot device, but not from the case of Federation. The last time assassination was used was usually for the Klingon Chancellor from Star Trek 16th Country. This book has many interesting little plot lines with it, but I'm not going to be every single one. But that was the major one with the assassination. That's the major arc for this series. And this book is just plain awesome. I give this book a 9 out of 10. Okay? Next up is Crimson Shadow, which is book 2 of the series, written by Una McCormick. And this takes place from August 24th to September 4th. So basically, December 4th, 2035. Basically, most of this book takes place during the events of the previous book, but it ends a few days after the previous book. This book has one major problem. Despite the fact being the second book of a 5-book miniseries, it is so boring. Yes, it is very boring. The only thing interesting about this book is that Elam Garak, a recurring character from Deep Space Nine, and this is the next generation book, he becomes the president of the Cardassian Union. And guess what his previous position was? Cardassian Union ambassador to the Federation. And he gets elected president. This is a guy who doesn't like the spotlight too much, and yet he becomes Cardassian president. That's the only thing really interesting about this book, is the fact he becomes president of the Cardassian Union. And in case you're wondering, what about the extraction cast? Riker and Troy is off on the Titan ship. Everybody else is still pretty much here. Worf is the first officer. Geordi is still chief engineer. Dr. Crusher is back being chief medical officer. Reed Death went to figure out the reason why. And of course, Picard is married and he's a father. And his son Renee is briefly in this book. He's the only one who actually does something in the entire book. Most of the characters do jack squat in here. Basically, this is just so boring of a book. I have no problem with the writer. It's just that the story itself was just so boring to read. I'm sure a lot of people probably had that problem when they read this book. But it has some things. It has some little plot lines here or there. But the major story of this particular book is not very interesting. Just an election process of. It's just basically Cardassian politics. I don't know why this could have just been the Elam Garak book, because he's the only person who's in he's in a good chunk of this book, and he's practically the star of it, even though it's a Next Generation book. He's the star of it. A DS9 reoccurring character is the star of a Next Generation book. But despite that, that book I gave 9 out of 10. This book, because it was just so boring, it's just barely above average of a novel. I'm going to give this book a 6 out of 10. This is the lowest rating I've ever given a Star Trek book. But the following books are much better than this. It's not garbage. It's not horrible. It's just boring, to say the least. That's the problem with this book. It is just so boring. But the cover is nice. As a matter of fact, covers for every single Star Trek book. Despite the fact this is a typical next generation cover, showing the ship on the cover in space. Despite it being a typical cover for Star Trek Next Generation, showing the ship and no floating heads. But despite that, the cover is nice. Elam Garrick, like the president of the Cardass unit, is good. It's a nice character development piece for him. But the rest of it here is just so boring. But the next book is much more exciting. 6 out of 10. Alright, stay tuned for the next episode, which will be episode 6 and Doubleshot number 2. So then, see you there. Bye.